This is as worthless as Ute. Let it rot here.
The bracelet hit the mud before she did. Madame Adieza's fingers had released it so fast, flung it like a thing diseased, and it landed in the red clay outside the compound gate, half swallowed by the wet earth, its gold dulled instantly by the storm. And then came Zuri herself, stumbling through that gate, her shoulders still stinging from where the woman's palm had landed, her bare feet finding the mud a second after the bracelet did. "Get out." Adieza's voice cut through the rain without raising itself. That was the worst kind of fury, the kind that didn't need to shout. "Get out and do not come back to this compound tonight. Sleep in the road for all I care." The gate swung shut. Zuri stood there, 19 years old, soaked through her wrapper before she had even taken a breath, rain driving sideways off the mango trees that lined the Okwu family compound. She had not stolen the bracelet. She had never stolen anything in her life. She had only been wearing it for one small foolish moment, because old Mama Dyke had asked her to try it on, had said, "Let me see how it looks on your wrist, child. You have such a delicate wrist." And Zuri had slipped it on, and then Adieza had come around the corner. And there was nothing Zuri could have said that would have made any difference at all. She picked up the bracelet. Her first instinct, even now, was to bring it back inside, to knock and say, "Here, madam, I was holding it for Mama Dyke. Please take it." She stood there a long moment with the bracelet cold and heavy in her palm. Then she closed her fingers around it and walked away from the gate into the rain. She had lived in that compound for 11 years. She had come to them at 8 years old, a child with no name anyone would claim, pulled from the edge of starvation by a trader who owed Adieza's husband a debt and had offered the girl as payment for it. Nobody had asked Zuri what she thought of this arrangement. Nobody had asked her much of anything in 11 years. She cooked, she swept. She fetched water from the stream before dawn so that the Okwu daughters could bathe with warm water and a girl who had already been awake for 2 hours. She was not beaten, not often, and not badly, and she was fed, and she had a mat near the kitchen, and she had told herself as she grew from 8 to 12 to 16 to 19 that this was enough, that this was what her life was. The rain intensified. She moved under the wide roof of an abandoned groundnut store at the edge of the market road and crouched there, watching the water sheet off the overhang in a curtain so thick you could almost lean your hand against it. She didn't hear him at first because the rain was so loud. She noticed him the way you notice a stone that was not there a moment ago. He was simply there, at the other end of the roof, an old man sitting on an overturned crate, an ancient goatskin drum across his lap. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the rain with the expression of a man who has made his peace with all of it. His clothes told you things. The white wrapper was old but carefully maintained. The leather strap across his chest held small iron bells that had gone green with age. His hands on the drum were the hands of someone who had spent 60 years in conversation with the instrument. Zuri shifted, meaning only to make herself smaller. He still didn't look at her, and then, without deciding to, she began to hum. She didn't know she was doing it at first. It was the song that came to her when she was cold or frightened. It had always come to her since before she could remember. A few notes, a small curling melody that folded back on itself like a sleeping child. She had never heard it from anyone else. She had asked once, and old Mama Dyke had tilted her head and said, "I don't know that one, child. Where did you learn it?" And Zuri had said she didn't know, and that had been the end of it. She hummed 3 bars, maybe 4. The old man's hands stopped moving on the drum. He turned his head and looked at her, and the look on his face was not the look of someone who has heard a pleasant sound. It was the look of someone who has heard a thing they had believed they would never hear again in this life. "Say that again," he said. "Sorry?" she said. "That song." He was staring at her with an intensity that should have frightened her, and somehow didn't. "Where did you learn it?" "I don't know. I've always known it. I don't know where it comes from." The old man was quiet for a long time. The rain kept falling. "That song," he said at last, "has no name that common people know it by. It is a lullaby composed for the daughters of the royal house of Asaban-Quo. It is not written down anywhere. It passes from a mother's lips to her daughter's ears, in that house only, from the time the child is born. I have heard it once before in my life, and that was 30 years ago, in the palace of the Obi of Asaba-Nenquo, from the lips of the queen as she sang her infant daughter to sleep." Zuri stared at him. Rain fell between them. "I am Ezenwachi," he said. "For 40 years I was the chief drummer of the royal house. I know that song the way I know my own heartbeat. Tell me your name, child." "Zuri. Just Zuri. I have no family name." He looked at her for a long, still moment. Then he said very softly, "You do. I think you have always had one. You just don't know it yet. And this is the part of the story that will shake you, because this is where something enormous begins, in a groundnut store, in the rain, between a girl who has just been thrown out in the mud and an old man with green bells on his chest. Something broken 11 years ago is about to try to put itself back together, and the people who benefit from it staying broken are going to fight very, very hard. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you are worth nothing and found yourself almost believing it, stay with this story. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because someone, somewhere, is already afraid of what Ezenwachi is about to say. He told it carefully. The way you speak when you are loading weight onto a bridge and are not certain it will hold. 20 years ago, the Obi of Asaba-Nenquo had a daughter, his first child. In that royal house, the mother line passed through daughters, a tradition stretching back to the founding. Ezenwachi had been in the palace when she was born. He had played the drums of welcome for her first breath. He had watched her mother sing her that specific lullaby. When the girl was 8 years old, a dispute over succession had been building for years. The Obi's brother Chukwemeka had a daughter of his own, 3 months younger, and his wife Ngozi wanted the mother line to pass through their branch. The Obi's daughter stood between Ngozi's child and that future. One night there was a fire. Contained quickly, but in the confusion, the Obi's daughter disappeared. Not found dead. Simply gone. The word given to the kingdom was that the child had been taken by the smoke, that her body had not been recovered. The Obi, already ill, collapsed with grief and died within the year. And Ngozi's daughter, a girl called Adana, grew up in the palace as heir of the royal house, sitting in the ceremonial chair, wearing the coral. But Ezenwachi had never believed the story. And there had been a detail, small, never spoken of publicly, that had lodged in him like a splinter. A kitchen servant named Chidinma, who had run away in the weeks after the fire, had come to him privately before she left. She had been crying. She had said, "I saw the child alive. I saw Ngozi's man put her in a cloth bag and carry her out through the market gate. But if I say it here, I will not live to say it again." Then she had run, and Ezenwachi had had nothing, no proof, no witness who would stay. And he himself had been quietly removed as chief drummer within 6 months, and sent home with a pension and a silence. He had spent 11 years waiting. Not looking, there was nothing to look for. Just waiting for the world to show him something, and then a girl crouched in a groundnut store had hummed 4 bars of the royal lullaby into the rain. "You think I am the Obi's daughter," Zuri said. "I suspect, and I hope, and I will need proof. But you are the right age. You were brought to this village at 8, which is when the child disappeared. And you know that song, which cannot be explained unless it was sung to you as an infant by someone of that house. There was a cloth bag, Zuri said slowly. I remember being inside it in the dark, and then outside, and it was morning and there were market sounds. She stopped. I always thought it was a nightmare. Ezenwachi closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. You did not imagine it, he said. They sat in the rain a while without speaking. We go to Asabanquo, he said. We go before the elders and present what we have, your age, your knowledge of the song, my testimony. And we look for the proof I was never able to find. Zuri looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, What if we go and they don't believe us? Then we will have tried, he said simply. And you will know more about yourself than you knew this morning. She took his hand, and they walked out of the groundnut store into the rain that was already beginning to ease. The journey to Asabanquo took 2 days, most of it walking, the last stretch on a market lorry, the old man and the girl sitting in the truck bed with sacks of yam around them, the dusty road unwinding behind. Ezenwachi talked during the walking parts. He told her the customs of the royal house, the names of elders who remained from his time, the way the mother-line ceremony worked, the emblems carved on the palace post. He tested her gently, asking what she remembered without telling her the answers first. Some things came back in pieces. The smell of a certain wood polish, a drum pattern heard through a thick wall, a woman's face bent over her in the dark with eyes that were laughing even while the rest of her face was serious. Ezenwachi listened to each fragment and turned it over carefully, fitting it against what he knew, saying nothing when a thing fit, and asking more questions when it didn't. At night, sheltered in the compound of a man who knew Ezenwachi from his drumming years, Zuri lay awake holding the gold bracelet from Adieza's mud and thought about what a life was worth. She had been thrown out of one family today. She was walking toward another. Both possibilities frightened her. The second one frightened her more because it was the one she might actually want. The Elder Council, 3 men and 2 women who held what remained of the royal house's governance since the Obi's death, agreed to receive them the following morning. Ezenwachi's name still meant something here. It got them a hearing. What would happen in that hearing was another matter. The council chamber was a long, low-roofed room with a central post carved with the royal house's emblems. The 5 elders sat on low benches. Ezenwachi spoke first, clearly, without hesitation, with the dignity of a man who had prepared every word during 11 years of waiting. He laid out what he had seen and known. He laid out the girl, her age, her song, her fragments. Then the oldest woman, Ne Obiora, whose white hair was wrapped in old coral cloth, said, "The child, sing what you sang for this man in the rain." The room was very quiet. Zuri stood up. Her throat was dry. She could feel the weight of the carved post and the 5 pairs of eyes. She sang 4 bars, folding back on itself. Ne Obiora's face changed. Not shattering, she was too practiced for that. But something moved behind her eyes, deep and private, and her hand came up involuntarily and pressed against her sternum. "I know that song," she said quietly. "I have not heard it since." She stopped herself, composed herself, looked at Zuri, then looked at the other elders. The room was on the edge of something enormous. You could feel it, the way pressure shifts before rain. And Zuri felt it, felt the terrifying, dizzying possibility that she was about to be returned to herself. The door opened. In came Adana, 20 years old, well-dressed, with the composed face of someone raised certain of her position. Behind her was her mother Ngozi, 50, elegant, whose eyes went immediately to Zuri with a calculation so quick and practiced you could only catch it if you were looking. Behind them was a young, broad-shouldered man Zuri had never seen. "We heard there was a petition before the elders," Adana said calmly. "We come to address it." They sat. And what had been a room on the edge of revelation became a room under siege. The young man was introduced as Obinna, a trader from the village where Zuri had lived. He had, Ngozi said, information relevant to the petition. When Obinna spoke, his voice was steady, and his eyes were fixed on a point above everyone's head. He told the elders that Zuri was the daughter of a dead weaver named Chisum, who had sold her child to a trader in a time of famine, that the song Zuri sang was a common lullaby of the region, known in many households, that he himself had heard it sung by village women all his life. Silence. "That is not true," Ezenwachi said. "I am telling you what I saw," Obinna said, still looking at his fixed point. "That lullaby is not common to any region. I have spent 40 years traveling this land with my drum, and never heard it outside the palace of Asabanquo. I challenge this man to name a single other household where it is sung. Memories fade in old age." Ngozi said gently. Eze Ihejirika, the eldest male elder, cleared his throat. "There is also the matter of blood. Without blood proof, no claim on the mother line can be recognized. A song and an old man's memory are not proof," Adana said. "They are stories." 3 words. And with them the room's gravity shifted. The other elders were looking sideways at each other, the careful glances of people, calculating what it would cost them to disagree with the woman who sat in the ceremonial chair. Zuri felt herself being gradually erased, felt the space she had briefly occupied, the space of someone real, someone who might belong somewhere, contracting back to nothing. As Ihejirika said, "The council will deliberate. The petitioner will return tomorrow for our response," which meant we need time to be told what to decide. Zuri and Ezenwachi walked out into the afternoon light and neither spoke for a while. "Obinna was paid," Zuri said. "Yes, they knew we were coming. Someone at the cloth stall yesterday." She looked at me and then away very fast. Ezenwachi nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," Zuri said. "The elders will say insufficient proof and send us away. And Adana keeps the chair and Ngozi wins." "Yes," Ezenwachi said. "Unless what?" He stopped walking and looked at her with that still, calculating look, a drummer counting a beat that isn't sounding yet, but that he can already hear. "There is something I have not told you," he said, "because I did not know if it still existed, and I did not want to give you hope I could not deliver. But tonight we go to find out." The herbalist Tabena, when Ezenwachi came to him with his question, was quiet a long time. He refilled his cup of palm wine. He looked at his hands. Then he said, "I don't know if she kept it." "Chidinma," Ezenwachi said to Zuri, "the kitchen servant who ran. I never knew where she went. But Tabena has lived here his whole life." Tabena said, "She went to her mother's village, 2 hours from here, across the river. She married there. I heard she never stopped being afraid. But I also heard," he paused, "I heard she kept something. Something she said she would only use when she had no choice. Something taken from the palace the night she ran." Zuri said, "What kind of something?" "I don't know. I only heard rumors." Ezenwachi set down his cup and looked at Zuri. "We have until morning," she said. They left before midnight. The river crossing was a narrow bridge of old wood that shifted but held, and on the other side the road narrowed to a path between stands of tall grass. They knocked at the first compound, past the mango tree, and Chidinma answered her own door. She was perhaps 40, with a face that had been pretty once, and had settled into something harder and more watchful. She looked at Ezenwachi for 3 seconds before she recognized him, and when she did, the color left her face. "I always knew someone would come," she said. "Chidinma, we need what you have. They'll kill me," she said. "If I do this. If you do nothing," Ezenwachi said. A girl who should be heir of this house will be erased tomorrow morning, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing you had the thing that could have saved her. Chidinma looked at Zuri. At her face, the shape of her jaw, something behind her eyes that connected to a memory from 20 years ago in a palace kitchen. "You look like her mother," she whispered. Then she went inside and came back with a small wrapped cloth bound with cord that had been tied and retied over many years. Inside was a piece of bark cloth, old and carefully folded, with markings in ochre. Ezenwachi bent over it in the lamplight. He read slowly. Then he sat down on the step outside and put his face in his hands. "What is it?" Zuri said. "The naming document," he said. "The royal house records the names of its daughters on bark cloth with ochre on the night they are born, in the presence of elders. There is always a second copy made for the mother's family. This is that copy. The Obi's daughter, her name, her birth date, the elder witnesses who were present." He looked up. "Chidinma, you were there that night, and you are willing to stand before the council and say that?" The silence was long. Chidinma looked at her hands. She looked at the dark path behind them, and the long road back to a town where a woman who had tried to destroy a child had been waiting for her own fear to go away. "I have been afraid for 11 years, she said at last. "I thought fear was keeping me safe, but I think it was just keeping me." She looked at Zuri. "Yes, I'll stand before them." They arrived back as the sky was going gray. The hour when the hornbill called from the iroko trees, Tobena made tea and said nothing, which was the right thing. Chidinma sat with the wrapped cloth on her knees and her hands very still, composing herself into something that might eventually become courage. The council met at mid-morning. Same chamber, same carved post, same 5 elders. Adana and Ngozi were already there with Obinna, clearly expecting to finish quickly what yesterday had begun. Then Ezenwachi brought in Chidinma. You could see Ngozi's face at the moment she recognized her. It was the only unguarded moment Ngozi would have that morning, lasting only a second, but in that second her composure showed the thing underneath. Not guilt, but cold calculation. The sharp look of someone who has been outmaneuvered and is already planning the next move. Chidinma spoke. Her voice shook for the first sentence and then steadied, the way a drum steadies once you find the beat. She spoke of what she had seen on the night of the fire. Ngozi's man with the cloth bag, the child inside it, the market gate. She spoke of the bark cloth, how she had pulled it from the kitchen fire, how she had carried it for 11 years. She named the night, the hour, the men she had seen. She did not embellish, she did not perform. She simply said what she had seen, and the quality of that clarity was itself a kind of proof. Obinna tried. He said she was lying, that she had been paid, that she was a woman of questionable character. He said it all without once looking at the people he was speaking to. Nena Obiora said, "Put down the document." Ezenwachi placed the bark cloth on the floor between the elders. Nena Obiora looked at it for a long time without touching it. Then she looked at Eze Nwodo, an elder who had also been in the royal house 40 years ago, and something passed between them in the space of a glance. Eze Nwodo reached into the fold of his wrapper and produced, with the deliberateness of a man who has been waiting for the right moment for decades, his own folded piece of bark cloth. Older, the ochre faded nearly to invisibility. He laid it down beside the first. He did not speak. The comparison made the speech unnecessary. The hand, the characters, the particular form the royal recorder used, they matched. Even Ngozi saw it. Nena Obiora picked up both pieces and held one in each hand. She looked at them, then looked at Zuri. "We will need the blood test," the old test, from the founding. 3 days, but I think we already know what it will say. She set down both cloths and looked at Adana and Ngozi with an expression that was not cruel and not triumphant, but was entirely, finally, without question. The hearing is suspended until the blood test is complete. The woman Ngozi and her daughter will remain within the town. The man Obinna also remains. There are questions that need answering. The 3 days of the blood test were the strangest days of Zuri's life. She was housed in a room in the compound adjacent to the council chamber, a clean room with a proper mat and a window that looked onto a fig tree, and she was fed well and treated with a careful courtesy that she did not yet know how to receive. People looked at her when she passed in the compound with the particular expression people give to something lost and possibly found, something that needs handling gently until it is certain. Ezenwachi sat with her in the evenings and told her more about her father, the Obi, a serious man with a gift for arbitration and a love of the river. He told her about her mother, who had been laughing and decisive and had played the small flute. He laid these things down in front of her, like pieces of a map, and let her arrange them herself. On the second day, Chidinma came to visit, and they sat quietly for a while, and after a time Chidinma said, "I should have come forward years ago, before you ever went to that compound." Zuri said, "You were afraid." Chidinma said, "Yes. But fear costs things. It costs other people things they did not choose to give." Neither of them said anything after that, but the silence between them was the kind that means something has been understood. On the third day the result was given to the elders, and Nene Obiora read the finding in the voice of someone stating what was already known. The blood test confirms that the petitioner is of the royal line of Asabankwo. And then she said the name. The true name, the one recorded in ochre on the night of Zuri's birth, the name her mother had sung into her hair, along with the lullaby, the name that had been buried under 11 years of just Zuri and girl and you there. When Zuri heard it, she felt something move in her chest. Not dramatic, not a flood or a shattering. More like a key turning in a lock that had been frozen a long time, the turning stiff and effortful, you not entirely sure the door would open even now. But it turned, the mechanism engaged, Nene Obiora continued. Ngozi had not confessed, she was far too controlled for confession, but she had stopped denying, which in this council was the same thing. Obinna had been more forthcoming. The details came out. The plan years in the making, the man with the cloth bag, the traitor paid in debt forgiveness, the instruction to go far and never return. The question of Adana was more complicated. She was 20, raised as heir, and as far as anyone could determine had not known the truth of her own elevation. A child, raised on a lie, is herself a victim of it. The elders would deliberate on her position. Nothing was simple, nothing was neat. But that was the work of governance. And governance was no longer Zuri's impossible dream. It was her inheritance. After the formal session, when the compound had emptied and the afternoon was going gold, Nene Obiora came to Zuri's room without ceremony and sat on the mat across from her. She was carrying a small folded cloth. She laid it in Zuri's lap without speaking. Inside was a string of coral beads. Not the large ceremonial kind, but small personal ones, worn smooth with handling. The deep orange of old coral touched many times by warm hands. "These were your mother's," Nene Obiora said. "She left them with me the week before the fire. I don't know why. Perhaps a feeling, perhaps chance. I have kept them for 20 years. I did not know who to give them to." A pause. "I know now." Zuri held the beads in both hands. They were warm, they should have been at room temperature, inside their cloth, but they felt warm. She pressed them against her sternum, and the lullaby came up in her throat, the small curling melody, folding back on itself. She didn't hum it aloud. She just let it be there. her mother's song, which was now her own, which she would carry forward into whatever came next. She thought about Adeyezi. Not with anger. She was done, she thought, with that particular kind of anger. But she thought about the voice saying, "Get out," and the gate swinging shut and the bracelet in the mud. She thought, if Adeyezi had not thrown her out, she would have gone back inside. She would have dried off and gone to sleep on her mat, and tomorrow would have been the same as yesterday, and the year after the same as this year, and she would have grown old in that compound carrying a name that was not hers and a song she could not explain. A daze had thrown her out. And then the rain had come. And then there had been an old man with green bells and a drum. She was not grateful to Adeyezi. That would be too much to ask of herself. But she thought, the rain found me. When the rain came for me, I was standing in the right place to be found. Ezenwachi sat with her later on the step of Tabenazma compound, the fig tree visible over the wall, a hornbill calling in the Iroko. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I was always something other than what she thought I was," Zuri said. "I just needed the rain to show me where I was standing." He put a hand briefly on her shoulder. Then he removed it. Because there was no more steadying needed, she was standing on her own. The hornbill called once more from the Iroko tree, and then was quiet, and the evening settled into itself. Somewhere in the compound behind them, a woman was humming, a cooking song, a working song, one of the ordinary songs of an ordinary evening. Zuri listened to it. She let it sit beside the other song. Her own song, the royal one that had been her whole secret life without her knowing. Two songs at once in the same dark. She thought she could hold both of them. She thought maybe that was what it meant to have a life. Not one song that explains you completely, but many songs, some inherited, some found in the rain, some not yet begun. The dark in Asaba Nankwo was the warm dark of a place that has looked at its own history fully and decided to go on. In a room with a window and a fig tree and a string of coral beads, a girl who had been told she was worth nothing finally, carefully, began the work of disagreeing.